for picking the guy wearing
that
the
like
tunnel.
legal?
Tommy's raising our standard.
Right. Nobody else wore a tie today. What's going on?
We didn't get your memo, Tommy.
Like, I'm the only true professional here.
Think anything you want.
Figure we'll get a little humor in before we start the show. We're gonna get a little serious here in a minute. We're gonna talk today about loss. Our good friend Larry, co-host on the show, had a serious issue with within his family, and so we're gonna kind of talk about that, and then talk about some of the things that we've all experienced and how we get through those tough times in life. I guess with that introduction, do you kind of want to lead in then, Larry, on kind of what you've been going through, the struggles you've had the past few months?
Sure. I mean, I can definitely start from the beginning. So, the day before Thanksgiving, I don't think we'll ever forget that day. And I actually haven't really talked about this much up until on this show. So, appreciate you guys letting me talk about it. So we found out, I believe it was in September, that we were pregnant. This was our fourth child. And if you ever want to know what it's like to find out you're pregnant with your fourth, just imagine that you're drowning and then someone hands you a baby. No, I'm kidding. But no, we were really, really excited, extremely excited. In fact, I think I was probably the most excited for this one, only because I have two older boys, Ethan and Mason, who are 19 months apart. And then I have a 6-year lag between Mason, who is 7, and my 1-year-old Lawson. So these two boys, we did find out it was a boy, Lawson, who's my youngest, and this one was going to be 19 months apart. So actually the same amount of time. So we actually thought, wow, how wonderful is that? It's 19 months apart, 19 months apart. We knew it was going to be busy, but we were excited. And so because my wife is 36, we had to get blood work done at the 10-week mark, which was right around Thanksgiving, just to test for Down syndrome and any other issues that might be present. So we thought, we're both pretty healthy individuals. We eat about as clean as you can possibly imagine, and we try to stay active. We're always working out. So of course, the health of a child had never really entered our mind that something could go wrong or would be wrong. So we found out the day before Thanksgiving. We got a phone call from our OBGYN. She let my wife know, hey, your test results came in, and the reason I'm calling you, and I know that this is bad timing, I know that this is the day before Thanksgiving, but I would want to know this information if I were you. And she basically told my wife, your baby tested positive for trisomy 13, which I had no idea what trisomy 13 even was or what that even meant. So basically the nurse described it as, you need to come in next week because trisomy 13 is a very serious condition and we need to talk about options. And she pretty much left it at that. So of course, as in our country, we hear something like that, we go on Dr. Google, and we start researching the internet, and as you know, the internet can really scare the bejesus out of you. So basically what trisomy 13 is it's an abnormality within the 13th chromosome. You get 23 chromosomes from the father, 23 from the mother, and trisomy 13 means there are 13 chromosomes versus having normal 2. So what that basically means is it's unfortunately it's fatal. The 13th chromosome is responsible for regulating heart, lung, brain, all the life vital organs. So babies who have trisomy 13 have a 40% chance of miscarrying. They have a 75% chance of not making it through the birth, and then they have a 98% chance of dying before their first birthday. So it's basically a death sentence. We learned from our OBGYN, we went in the next week, and she said, look, I've never seen a trisomy 13 baby live, and I've been doing this for 20 years. So I'm just letting you know that. And there's no shame. She didn't coach us either way, but she said there's really no shame in if you would like to terminate this pregnancy. The folks that get this news usually do. So, she positioned it as, you almost have to look at this, whatever your religious background is or whatever your belief is. We're Catholic. We don't believe in abortion. I never have. She goes, but you almost have to view this as what's going to be best for you. So we really weighed our options. Knowing your baby is going to die is one thing. Knowing that you have a power to make that decision is bad. So anyway, we decided originally a week after Thanksgiving that we were going to terminate. The reason we decided that was because we looked at this in probably the most logical way you could possibly think of. We thought miscarriage and abortion is traumatic, but giving birth to a child that's going to die is going to be life-changing. So we decided to terminate. Well, the day before we decided to terminate, which was actually going to be on December the 12th, which was a Friday. So on December 11th, I think it was weighing heavily on both of our minds. I went to my wife and I told her, I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm on board with this. I don't know if we should make this decision, and maybe we should seek some counseling or seek some coaching elsewhere. Her response was, I'm so glad you said that because I was kind of thinking the same thing. So we decided to push off our decision to make that decision until we got more information. So we decided to meet with our priest, who's the pastor of our church, along with a family counselor. And we presented them, those decisions. And this is how it was told back to us, which made an incredible amount of sense. The counselor told us, look, clearly we understand, there's a decision to be made here, and it's not an easy one. And clearly this is a different situation. It's not like this baby was not conceived out of love, and it's not like you guys are like, hey, we just don't want a fourth, so we're going to go ahead and end this pregnancy. It's something completely different. However, if you decide to abort this baby, it becomes a situation that eventually will eat away at you. And you'll be thinking, what if? And it'll be something that the story you'll tell others is, we miscarried the baby, and that was that. And every time you tell that story, you're going to think of exactly what really happened. And it's going to be back to that decision that you guys made. He's like, if I could propose anything to you, it's to keep this baby as long as you possibly can, no matter how hard it is, because what you're going to find is there won't be any negative feelings around it. In fact, you'll have more people congregating around you because you've made that decision, and so much support that you won't even know what to do with it. So even though it'll be hard, it will be a positive experience. So during that counseling session, it made a lot of sense to me because, of course, my main concern was not only if we go full term with this child, how is my wife and I going to cope with watching a baby boy die in the NICU? And how am I going to explain this to my 8-year-old, my 7-year-old, that their brother is dying and they have to see that? However, I think it sent a clear message. To make a long story short, we decided that day to go full term, and we decided not to abort. And I have to tell you, I thought that there was going to be a lot of stress involved with that decision, but it was actually one of the best and most peaceful decisions, I think, of the entire 6 weeks we were going through all this. And I think the clear message was, instead of thinking, how am I going to get my 7-year-old and my 8-year-old through this, how can I spin it as a positive message? And I thought about it a lot, and the way I positioned it to them was, my plan was, this is the situation that we're dealt with. However, this is still our son. This is still your brother. and no one in this family gets left behind. Sorry. So that was our message, that no one gets left behind, no matter what. So there was a lot of peace in that decision. We had not told my kids, this was now rolling into Christmas, we had not told my kids any of this as of yet. We decided that we were going to wait until we were going to get through Christmas and then tell the kids what was going on. So this had been going on for almost a month. We found out 2 days before Christmas. We went to go see a high-risk specialist 3 days before Christmas, who dealt only with extreme cases like this, that basically we knew we needed someone who had a lot of knowledge about getting this child through birth, because there was going to be a lot of complications with just getting the child, out. We did an so we had an appointment, we had an ultrasound, and we had found out 2 days before Christmas that the baby had miscarried. There was no heartbeat. So here's the good thing about that. Out of that situation, that is probably the best situation you can ask for, because there's no pain involved. There was no decision that we had to make. And there was no trauma of watching a baby born alive and then dying. So miscarriage, believe it or not, is probably the most peaceful thing. So there was some heartache with that, but there was a lot of peace with that. So the specialist told us, look, the baby's miscarried. You're 17 weeks along. The baby's too big for, we gotta think options of getting this baby out safely. So go home, take a week, get through Christmas, come back next week, we'll talk about it. 5 days passed. It was the Sunday after Christmas, and we still had not told my kids what was going on. My wife was still pregnant, and she went into labor at our house. And I'm not talking about a contraction or two. I'm talking she went from 0 to 10 with labor. We were getting ready to leave. She ran into the bathroom, and there was blood everywhere. So in a panic, I called my neighbors. I got my 2 older boys out of the house. Basically, I told them, hey, the neighbors are going to come over, the kids want to play with you, and my neighbor came over and got them out of the house. I then called 911. Paramedics came. At this point in time, my 17-week-old stillborn child was half out of my wife. We ended up giving birth. She gave birth to our 17-week-old stillborn child in our bathroom with these 2 paramedics. And that was, I can't describe that. There are no words that I can describe that. I will tell you this. My wife held him, and I got to see him, and he was no bigger than her hand. And I decided, for some reason, I don't know why, I decided not to hold him, and I don't know why that is. I think the situation was so much for me that I was focusing so much on trying to hold her, support her, and I'm like watching this whole thing unfold and seeing my son and this whole situation come to fruition. And we took my wife to the hospital. She was checked out and she was healthy, and they let us go home after an hour and a half. So, we made arrangements. We ended up naming him Gabriel, and we ended up naming him Gabriel because we figured the name was appropriate, because we figured the only thing that got us through that entire 6 weeks was the strength of God. So we held a service for him, a very intimate service at a funeral home for just myself, my wife, and our priest. And that's the picture I actually put on Facebook, with our hands and a heart over him in his little casket. I can tell you this, and I'll end with this. That was by far the worst 6 weeks of our lives. I never would have thought in a million years. And it wasn't so much the tragedy of losing a child. It was the decisions that went into everything. And the first thing you think about when you wake up and the last thing you think about before you go to bed. And every time my wife saw my face and every time I saw her face, we knew for those 6 weeks that's exactly all we were thinking about. And to end the story, we ended up telling my 7-year-old and my 8-year-old just a couple weeks ago of everything that had happened. I don't think I was prepared for the level of grief that my 8-year-old and 7-year-old, they're pretty strong kids. And the level of shock and grief that they experienced, now obviously we didn't go into detail with much. We kept it very simple, but remaining strong for them, and I've been challenged with that a bit because I don't know how to get them through that, and that's, I think, at the next level. My wife and I think emotionally we're pretty much through it, but now we're focusing on trying to get them through it. And I hope that wasn't a Debbie Downer of 15 minutes of our past 6 weeks, but my hope is that my story will at least help not only parents who are afflicted with trisomy 13, but you know, when you're on the Modern Dad Council and you try to make a dad movement, whether that be through, you know, Kick-Ass Dad, the Good Dad Project, and you really try to be a full-on dad, you're just not ready for a curveball like that. And there's so many things that go through your head that question your humanity that, you know, I think you can think that you're a terrible person at some points in time, and whether or not you're doing the right thing. And I guess my message is for men to talk to other men openly about these things, because I knew how important it was for me to talk to other people about it, and I never did. And I think Chris on this show can attest that I had several people reaching out to me on phone calls and text messaging, and I literally went into a shell for about 5 weeks, and I didn't talk to anybody. And I think that was probably the worst thing I could have done, was thinking that I had to remain very stoic about it and remain so strong about it, but on the inside I was struggling so bad it wasn't even funny. So I think a message that guys can really take away from this is that if you're going through something like this, seek out somebody who you can talk to and seek out a support network. And that's really been my story in a nutshell.
Thank you. Honestly, thank you for sharing that. I know that wasn't easy for you to talk about, and you know, we've been talking over the past few months, and I know it's been a really difficult time for you. So I really, from the bottom of my heart, I give you credit for being able to come on here and tell that story and share that with us and with, you know, the people watching, because there are a lot of men going through something similar to that, and they don't know how to handle it. They feel all alone, like they're going through it by themselves, when, you know, obviously now with your story out there, there's somebody they can relate to. And my hat off to you. I mean, I don't know how I would have gotten through it. So
thank you.
Larry, our hearts are really with you. It's and you said if people go through things like this, and all of us do go through things like this, and I love your guidance and your counseling on that. It isn't if, it's when. There's always a big event, an event that's too big for us, that reminds us that we're kind of not supposed to do this by ourselves. You know, that the purpose of community is to realize that when things feel like they're overwhelming, there's a place to go. And I love that your church was there for you for that. That, you know, that some other mind can listen to it, some other heart can feel it, and give you some counsel, some guidance, some information, if it's nothing more than that. And you know, I'm hard pressed to think of something as tragic or as hard as the thing that you went through. But I'm also encouraged by how we can figure the roadmap through whatever life sends us, knowing that it's not supposed to always be easy. But if we look and find something valuable in it, it doesn't change the fact that it's hard, but at least change the fact that it's good. And how might we be on our feet with it? So,
thank you.
Larry, we've never met before. Hearing this, so this is our first time connecting, and I'm just, I just, I think the key that my heart is expanding into is just the knowledge that we're never as alone as we feel. And I'm so grateful that you took this opportunity to share. Here I am like a crying mess, and that's it's a way to be a crying mess with you, and rather than think that there's a person that I haven't met that's suffering alone. So I want to just be in gratitude about what who we can be for each other as the Modern Dad Council, and to know that that even though today is the first day we met, I'm here, I'm here at any time, day or night, to cry with someone, whatever it means to be present with you. I just want you to know that you're not alone, and if that just means that I'm only speaking for me, that's what it means. But I'm really grateful that you had the courage to share that way, because there's I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not kind of a Christian in any too many ways. But I did go to Bible study, and one of the things that I learned at that Bible study was that, in essence, the devil, if you will, wants you to feel alone, wants you to think that you're the only one going through whatever you're going through. But God wants you to know that you are never, ever alone. And so, I'm feeling the power of that knowing right now. And so I just say thank you, Larry. I don't even know if I would have had the courage to make the decisions that you made. And it's, I don't know if it's bringing up shame for me, but when my third child was conceived, I went, and there was a whole bunch of health around her, and I was still going through some of the decisions that you were going through, because I wasn't ready necessarily in my own way of being to be a father of a third child. And so her middle name is Hope, because I was already in a relationship and a marriage that was rocky, and we gave her a middle name Hope, just to kind of add inspiration to whatever her coming onto the planet, could have been to our relationship. And it's been a really hard thing to talk about for a while. But she's such a blessing, you know what I mean? And I'm sort of glad that it wasn't just up to me to make those decisions. And what you shared, about your wife, you were the leader of that conversation. You brought stuff up that that she probably was added to her courage, so you brought it up first, and you modeled leadership, true noble leadership. And so that's amazing. So I'm here, and I'm blown away in whatever this moment is, but it's one of the most impactful experiences my heart has ever experienced, with this new technology we have. So thank you.
Tommy, did you want to add something?
Well, Larry, thank you so much for sharing. Um, my former wife and I, we didn't go through the extreme that unfortunately you and your wife and your family did, but we had, the first time she was pregnant, we went through something similar. And it's one of those learning opportunities of who you marry. And I say that because we had to go through a similar situation where she had to go in and had the baby wasn't forming, and the idiot I was all excited, you know, being a newborn or a new dad, and we named the baby Nicholas, and it was hard, you know, going through that. And you know, after we went to the hospital to have, you know, the baby, you know, removed, one of those eye openers of, again, who you marry, the first thing out of her mouth after we got home was, "Can you go to Taco Bell for me?" And I don't know why, but that has always bothered me, because here you go through a tragic event, and the only thing in your mind is, and I understand, you know, we all are hungry, and not to give Taco Bell free plugs, but she was a Taco Bell fan, and you know, I remember when she was going through her second pregnancy with Connor, you know, she always loved, you know, the spicy foods, but and again, I don't know why, but it was always something so bizarre, because here you go through this tragedy, and all you can think of is food, and I don't know, maybe it was her way of coping, maybe it was her shutdown mechanism, maybe it was her way of just saying, "Hey, all right, time to move on." But you know, I was a mess. I mean, not. I mean, here we had planned on, you know, having a baby in our life, and I don't know, just something that's always bothered me. And then, you know, listening to your story, Larry, I mean, I don't know how many of us could have done that. And so, like Eric was saying, I'm so grateful for your story. I'm so grateful for this group that we can, you know, hopefully share and help.
Well, Larry, I think everybody in this group, and I'm sure everyone who watches this wants to reach out and give you a hug right now, and you deserve that. What an incredible story, and what incredible courage for you to not only to go through it, but to share it with us. And I think what you were talking about at the end, where you mentioned how you sort of turned inward, and now, you know, you're benefiting from hearing and communicating with other people about this, is you're talking about the power of connection. And when Tommy mentioned what happened with his wife in that moment over the food, that was a disconnect. You know, that was two people not connecting over the same incident, not really being in the same place. But this power of connection is something that men often don't take advantage of or see the value of, because so many of us are taught and trained and conditioned that we're supposed to go through it alone, that we have to be the strong ones. You know, I've got to be there for my wife, I've got to be there for my kids, I've got to be there for anybody else. You know, so sort of where does that leave us in the picture? And I think one of the things that we're doing here with the Modern Dad Council, and it cannot be said enough times, is that it's okay for men to be vulnerable. It's okay for men to cry. It's okay for men to have emotions and feel about these things and share those feelings with other people and not be judged for it. And just, you know, we're all human. I mean, anybody would be flooded with huge rain, overwhelmed with emotion going through what you went through. And so freeing us up to share and to come forward and to be vulnerable and to break down and, you know, to get that hug, I think is a part of the work that we're doing here, and I just want to obviously I want to give you that hug.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that, guys. And to be honest with you, I mean, before even coming on the show, I mean, I'm not much of an emotional person, and I think I tried to mentally get my mind ready for about 30 minutes before I got on this show, and I think the mantra was like, I'm not going to cry on this show. But reliving all that is, man, it takes you back there. And I think that is the main takeaway, is that it's more important for men to link arms when it comes to something like this, because our first instinct and our first reaction is to not. Our first instinct and reaction is to, I have to be strong, I cannot be vulnerable, because that's weak. And if I talk about it, I'm weak. It's like they automatically equate expressing even dialogue about it, that you're weak. The other thing too that I struggled with is I'm a very positive person, or I try to be, and I never want to be that person who wears somebody out and talks about the bad news. I mean, I've always been kind of the person that I try to make people laugh versus bring the temperature in the room down. And I was so afraid to talk about this stuff because, like, I did a couple times with a few friends, and I could tell when I talk about it, it was almost too much. Like, it was almost like the situation was so huge emotionally. It was almost like, holy cow! Like literally, I think I talked to two people about it, and they were both like, I don't even know what to say to you. Like, that's kind of my reaction. Like, I wish I had something I could respond to you with, but I just don't. And I mean, I think so. Something like that, it can be taken as, it's in my mind it was too much for people to handle. So why talk about it? But in a way, there were a lot of people that reach out and they want you to talk about it because they care, and they, a way that you could show appreciation is talking about it, to that person who's asking about it. So, but yeah, I mean, I think if anything, it's so important for a man to find that network where they can express those things safely is key.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard. We don't know what to say, so we're like, well, I don't even know how to respond to this, so I'm just not going to say anything. I'm not going to allow myself to be vulnerable and put myself out there. It's not manly to cry. It's all these super committees that we have in the back of our head telling us what we should or shouldn't be and how we're supposed to act. And I remember my grandma, when she died, I was trying to be the strong one and be supportive of my mom and my aunts and cousins. And like probably 2 weeks later, I had some friends over, and I don't remember what triggered it, but something triggered it, and I just broke down and I started bawling. Like, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was really, really close with my grandma, so I went through that whole time period holding that back, and then finally in the middle of this, like, supposed to be a party, I break down and I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I'm going to be the bummer of this party now because I haven't dealt with the fact that my grandma passed away. And I think it's necessary for us to go through those emotions and feel it and understand this, what it is that we're feeling and what we're going through, more so than being that. I mean, it's obviously you need to be there for your wife and things like that, but you've got to heal also. And as men, I think we oftentimes forget about that, and we just focus more on being that rock for everybody else, and we neglect ourselves.
I think that's true, Chris, and even if we don't know what to say, and sometimes we don't, sometimes just being there, sometimes just being present checking in on somebody, how are you doing, or even just sitting silently with someone. I remember when my ex-wife's father died and we went back to her house for a few days, and there were all these people in and out of the house, and this one friend of their family, this guy, he'd always struck me as kind of a jerk. He was obnoxious. He liked to make fun of people, but he was there for like 3 days straight, just sitting at the kitchen table. He didn't move. He was just present, and there was something very powerful about the fact that this man cared enough to take 3 days of his life and just be present there from morning until night in that house to show his support for the family.
I think we've learned some cultural things that hold us back in this, and part of the reason why I like the name Modern Dad Council is what can we challenge that doesn't serve us, and start to cry or respond. I wouldn't even call it crying as much as responding to something that truly triggers a legitimate emotion. Why is it we apologize for making everybody around us uncomfortable because we're unhappy? I mean, just some funny things that when you start to tear back a little bit, we start to look at some of the things that we do, and maybe we can challenge some of those, and maybe we, by looking at what happens to each of us. And today Larry shared this huge, powerful story, and I know our lives meaning at some point in time it's going to be other things for the rest of us. That what is it that we can then truly show up and not apologize for the life that we're living and the things that are happening to us, but that we accept it as part of the way we show up, so that we don't have to make or feel like we make everybody around us uncomfortable when what we really need them to do is see that we're really hurting, and we'd really like you to reach out and give us a hug or do something like that. And if we quickly send the guard back up and say, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to cry, like we all do, then what we do is create that little bit more boundary or wall between us and the next person who really wants to come over and give you a hug or say, hey, it's all right, or can I just sit with you? And we just jump right back into those stereotypes about who we have to be. And that have to be is where I think the big problem is. Who are we versus who do we have to be? And maybe as modern dads, we can start to challenge that so that this generation and the next generation won't be so twisted in looking at the tough things of life and pretending that they have to make sure they have all the answers.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Jay. Challenging the status quo or whatever, and just being, instead of trying to fit that image, just be, and at the same time, it's like, I know there was a few times where, I'd reach out to Larry, I'm like, I hope I'm not bothering him, I don't want to keep bringing this up, and, I had a lot of feelings like, I want to be there for him, but I don't want to be, like, bombarding him with all of this, like, hey, I'm trying to, like, get my mind off of it, and now I got Chris messaging me, oh, like, how's things going? Like, great, bring me right back down into it. So part of me was real hesitant in doing that, but I guess really it's just wanting to let the other person, in this situation, it happened to be you, Larry, that I just wanted to let you know, like, hey, I'm here if you want to talk, if you need anything. And I don't think we get enough of that in our day. At least I don't, and I don't have a lot of guys besides my council members that I can talk to in my personal life. Even my best friend, it's like I can kind of talk to him, but if I start getting a little too emotional, he's like, all right, enough of that, So,
Chris, maybe you bring up a really good coaching opportunity here. Maybe the question for Larry at that moment, and maybe for the rest of us, is how can I be there for you? Not, what do I need to do, or are you okay talking about this? But share with me how I can be there for you. I don't know what you need, and there's no way I would know what you need. And so can I create some space to ask you, what is it, and how could I be there for you in the way that you need me, whatever that is? And I think that might take some of the pain or the concern that we must have the answer, and just ask a question and be open for wherever it is. And Larry, tell me if if you heard a question like that, would that help you, or would that force you to still have to make some decision about talking about something you don't want to talk about?
I think that's a great point. And just to be clear, Chris, I mean, I don't know if you've gotten the restraining order yet or not, but you should have gotten it.
I haven't checked today's
I
mail.
of course say that. Yeah. Of course I say that in all joking, and just to be clear, every time I got a text message from you, it was it made me feel good. There was never a point in time that I was like, oh man, I wasn't thinking about it, but now I was, because to be honest, there wasn't a minute of the day that I wasn't thinking about it. It was the first thing I thought about when I woke up. It was the last thing I thought about before I went to bed, and every minute in between, it was almost like I can't describe. It's the elephant in the room. It's always there. So every time I would get a text message, you know, it just made me feel like, man, there's somebody out there that cares enough to whether that be a close friend, an acquaintance, what have you. But as a man, it's like, well, you know, hey, that's really cool. You know, that person's thinking of me and wondering if I'm okay, which makes me feel good. You know, it kind of cushions the blow of a situation like that. But I think Jay is exactly right, because I think a person going through something that type of emotional roller coaster, I can honestly say that there wasn't one point in time where I could sit somebody down and be like, you know what, here's what I need from you. Because I think at that point I was so overwhelmed, I had no idea what I needed. However, had somebody asked me, that's why I think it's such a great idea from Jay as a coaching tool. If you have a friend, maybe it's a good idea to ask them, you know, hey, what can I do for you? What do you need from me? Because that makes the person going through it stop for a second and think, you know, what do I need? Is there something I do need? Because I think the whole time you're thinking, I don't know what I need. So therefore, all your thought processes is concentrating on the problem and not the solution. But if someone helps present you to think about a solution, that helps.
You know, I was really diving into that question too, and I feel like another question could be, how can I be there with you? You know, because I mean, I think the idea of four may also like conjure up shame and kind of feeling like a charity case. But like, you know, earlier when we were knowing that none of us are alone and that we're all gonna, in essence, take turns on going through amazing transitions in life. You know, when I think of the word for, I think of a sort of an imbalanced relationship. But when I think of the word with, I'm like, oh, you know, like that's what presence is. That's what connections are. You know, and so like maybe in a way that the shame is like, I don't want to think like I'm a charity. You know, but if someone, you know, breaks through that and says, how can I be there with you? Holy cow! Like, you know, and you know, as you know, Tom said, like, how do we equip ourselves with that language? How do we evolve so that we can incorporate that almost in advance? Like, you know, how do we define our friendships so that we know what the accountabilities are in advance of all this stuff? Just knowing that we're all going to go through, you know, huge transitions on the celebration side and on the, you know, I guess side of, you know, whatever you'd call what you just experienced, Larry. You know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, because, you know, how you internalize it is your own. You know, I don't want to value judge it as good, bad. You know, these are the things that we get through with each other. So,
Eric, I think you
I'm
just
inspired. Yeah.
I think you just hit on it. And how do we equip ourselves with that language of like what to say and what to do? And we already have it. It's just that we've never been given permission to use it. It's thinking and feeling, what would I want if I were going through this? I would want to be hugged. I would want to be comforted. I would want someone to check on me. Those are the things that if I were going through what Larry was going through, that's what I would want. When I was going through my first divorce, my best friend called me every single week, you know, on the same day, pretty much at the same time, it was an absolutely amazing thing. Now, how did he know that's what I wanted? That's why he's my best friend. But if you think about what you would want, and then you give yourself the permission and the freedom to give that to someone else, that it's okay. It's okay for you to want that. It's okay for the other person to want that, and it's okay for you to give it too.
Yeah, really good point. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time talking about this stuff today. I'm like, like, I'm kind of stuck in this emotional state, and my mind's not quite working right.
Chris, like what was the lady on Saturday Night Live? We're all verklempt.
Yeah. Eric kind of hit on something before. This whole subject brings up a lot of shame for me, because I had a girl. It was actually my ex-wife, but we were dating at the time, and she was pregnant. She wasn't very far along. It was like within the first 2 months of her pregnancy, and she had a miscarriage. And I was a real a-hole about the whole thing. And I still, to this day, hold a lot of shame for the way that I talked to her and treated her through the whole, situation. And I mean, a lot of it was because I was feeling pain, but instead of being hurt by it, I put that facade up and puffed my chest and kind of stepped into a real asshole role. And I don't think that's too uncommon for us men to tend to do. But I had mentioned that to Larry before. I'm real ashamed of how I acted and treated her, and as if it was like her fault that she went through this. And I don't know. I still struggle with that today, and how I was and things I did.
Well, Chris,
So
the question I'd ask you is, so you still have the ability of being whole to it. What comes up for you, and what would you do next, besides live in the past? But so what lesson is here now, or what bridge needs mending? Just to me, all of those could be possibilities. So that the way that you feel now isn't the way that you carry it forward.
Yeah,
I can.
Go ahead, Larry.
I can close with this. I do have to run. I have to get on another appointment that I have to get to. But I did want to say this, Chris. I think that there's a lot of validity to what you said, because going through that 6-week period of that emotional roller coaster, there were experiences, there were feelings and experiences that I went through that I've never been through, and there were certain things that I said and did. The same thing with you, Chris. Luckily I have a very giving wife, because I'll never forget it. I'll share this with you as well, and I'm sharing this because I want other men to maybe understand this, or maybe see it coming before you do something like Chris did or like I did. So in the midst of all this craziness that was going on, it's this in and of itself was such a huge emotional roller coaster. It's hard to possibly imagine managing the rest of your life, or raising 3 kids and working a full-time job and blogging and trying to, and the whole time we were going through this, the Good Dad Project was, it's hit a skyrocketing. We have a sponsor now for a podcast. I just got hired for an entire year for church to do 10 seminars, and all this was going on at once. And I was holding so much in at one point that one night I felt like I was picking up the slack. I was being strong for my wife. I was doing a lot of things around the house that she just wasn't able to get to. I was working full time. I was doing everything, and I was trying to corral the kids and be everything to everybody. And I'll never forget, I think we were like 3 weeks into this whole process, and I was cleaning the house one night, and I kind of got just resentful all of a sudden. Just because I just had so much anger built up about the whole situation, and everybody calm, that I just sort of lost it. And my wife came home, and of course she's a mess, this whole thing. And the conversation I had with her is, I don't really think that this is fair. I know you're going through this and I'm going through this. We're both going through this, but I feel like I'm doing 90% of everything and I can't do it alone anymore. Like, you've got to pick up the slack. You've got to help me out. And that's the way I presented it to her, and it was so unbelievably wrong, and I saw my words just cut right through her. And I woke up the next morning and I scratched my head and I was like, what in God's name are you thinking? Like, how could you say something like that when there are situations? So I pulled her aside the next day and I just told her, I was like, look, I'm really sorry. I don't have any excuse for how I talked to you last night. The only thing I can say is that I'm so overwhelmed with emotion that I don't know how to express it. And I have so much anger, I don't know how to express it. And unfortunately, I was just going through a bad time, and I lashed out at you, which was the last person I should have lashed out at. And really, I wasn't lashing out at you, I was lashing out at the situation. And you were there. And I could tell, I mean, my wife is a very forgiving person, but I could tell she was like, I appreciate that. But in her mind, it was like, man, you know, like I could tell, like, you hurt me big time last night saying that stuff. So I think it was that point in time I really learned how important it was that maybe I need to go and have a support network, because holding it all in does nothing but, you know, allow you to lash out when probably at the worst possible times.
Yeah.
That was it.
No, you said it. That's really what I did. I didn't tell anybody that we were pregnant yet because I wanted to wait till we were at that like 3-month period, you know, where it's a little bit more safe. And then when that happened, I just completely pushed off, let her take, you know, the bearing of everything. I wasn't there for her. She went to the hospital, and I was up north, about an hour north for work. And she called me, like, telling me she's in the hospital. I was like, well, I'll be back when I can. I got work to do. It's like, I don't know how you can be a bigger jerk than that. And I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm more embarrassed. But, you know, it's a tough. You can't really take those things back because you know those are wounds that you're creating in them that you just can't take that back. You can't. You know, an apology isn't going to repair that. And, you know, Larry, I think the amount of support and the type of relationship that I see with you and your wife, I know, you know, she knows your heart, and she knows that, you know, you were just at that point where, like, you didn't know how to handle that emotion, and so, but I don't know.
Well, and Chris, I feel like, you know, apologizing is such a beautiful process in and of itself, you know, but many of our apologies are incomplete because they have the words "I'm sorry," yet they don't include the "what can I do to make this right?" You know, and I feel like that's another language we can learn and another evolution we can go through as we become the modern dads that we know we are. You know, we're not going to play it right 100% of the time, and we also need to be gentle with ourselves when we don't get it right. You know, I mean, Larry, I mean, like, you didn't know you were going to need as much support as you needed. You know, I mean, not many people know that in advance, you know, and have the structures set up, you know, in advance. So, so yeah, I mean, it's you know, and I think that's the beautiful thing about faith is that that we know that we're forgiven already, you know. So I think that's, you know, that's one thing that I love about faith in a way.
Yeah. I know Larry and Thomas have to jump off. So, you know, I think we can kind of wrap up now, unless, Jay, do you have some insightful practices that coaching tips to give at the
No,
end of all this?
thank you for the vote of confidence, but I'm still a little bit reeling from all of the news that I've heard today.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Other than the biggest thing that I've learned in this whole thing is to be present to what happens. That sometimes there's a bigger story going on. We don't even know the answer to it. We don't know where the value in this might be. But if we show up to it, we might catch it. So how present could we be? How aware could we be? And how accepting could we be that this is what's going on in this moment? And from that, what wisdom will happen so the next moment will be wiser? And maybe it's just I rely on the people around me is the wisdom that came out of today's story. Or that it's okay for men to be human and connected to their families and feel the loss and show that when much of the press around what men should do says don't do any of that. And so none of it's easy, but it always brings us to a better place if we tune in.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I know today was kind of a rough topic, so I appreciate everybody showing up and really adding the value to this tough subject. So thank you, and we'll see y'all next week.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Bye.